We're gonna welcome to the webinar, everybody. I just want to say a quick hello, and I'm going to use the chat, and you're welcome to do so today as well. But this webinar is called How to Boost Learning Accessibility in 2022. And we're going to spend an hour today. We hope to have time for questions. We're going to cover a lot and go really fast. So please reach out with questions anytime, and we can also share the slides with you. So I'm just going to introduce the panelists today and also start with a territorial acknowledgement. So we're all coming from different parts of Canada right now. I personally live on the Coast Salish lands in New Westminster, BC. It's just outside of the Vancouver area. And in particular, I live on the Kakite Nation. So it's the unceded territory of most Coast Salish peoples. And I'd invite everybody, when I introduce the speakers, you're welcome to say, share a little bit of your territorial acknowledgement, or if you'd like to say hello to everyone in the chat and share where you're joining us from today, that would be great. And so today I'm really honored to be joined by two fantastic colleagues, some strong women and very skilled and experienced professionals. I'm joined by Anu Pala. She is a coach, consultant, trainer, and a fantastic podcast producer. She runs Anu Vision Coaching and Consulting. She's one of Leah Chang Learning's assistive technology testers, and we've been working with her off and on for a few months now. We're really enjoying the collaboration and learning alongside you. So thank you for joining us, Anu. Is there anything you want to say just to introduce yourself quickly?
No, you did a great job. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm just very excited to be with everyone this morning. And hello.
Yeah, thanks, Anu. I should also mention that among the many skills and expertise that Anu will bring to the webinar today, she also is a person who lives with complete vision loss. So we're going to see a little bit of her experience when she uses technology and how she, how she navigates through content. So that's going to be really eye-opening for the rest of us. And I'd also like to say a very warm welcome to Lindsay Clark, who is a dear and valuable colleague and one of, I'd like to say, Canada's leading industry leaders in terms of e-learning professionals. And she's probably blushing right now if you could see her face, but she is truly a very experienced person, and we're very lucky to have her right now. She's on mat leave from her very demanding position at ATB Financial as the Director of Learning Experience. I think I got that right. She also works with us in the Leah Chang Learning team and works on some very challenging projects in terms of, the most demanding projects that require all of us to really up our game in terms of accessibility. So she has ample experience that way. So Lindsay, thanks for joining us. I know that you're on your mat leave and we're lucky to have you. Is there anything else you want to add for your introduction?
No, you sang my praises. I match the color of my background now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, she really likes pink. So you'll see lots of pink today. And that's okay, because we are a bunch of women today talking about our expertise. So thanks for joining us. I really appreciate supporting other femalepreneurs in this space. So speaking of which, we have two other amazing people joining us today. We have Shelby, who is signing right now. Thank you to Maple Communications, who is providing the ASL interpretation. And you'll probably see Lisa at some point when Shelby needs a break. I just want to say a shout out to Maple Communications, great organization. And I'm loving experimenting and including ASL interpreters in our events to increase accessibility, and I encourage you to do the same. So that was one of our free tips today. We have more to share. So just very quickly, there's lots of ways to participate. I'm going to be asking you some questions just to cue your brain. If you'd like, you're welcome to answer in the chat. You don't have to, though. The idea is we'd like to do some prompting. We will have two polls. If you'd like to vote in those, they should be accessible. If you have any issues with the polls, you're welcome to answer in the chat instead, and we will be reading those out. There's a short feedback survey at the end, and you can always email any of us at any time. We do have the wonderful Sharon, who is moderating today. She's there if you have any technical questions, or if you want to ask a question of the speakers, and we're sort of running through our slides. So please reach out to Sharon anytime in the chat. And Sharon, would you like to say a short hello? I know that you're always holding the fort when we're doing these webinars.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Leah. I just want everyone to know I'll be turning my camera off after this, but I am here. So please send me a message in the chat if you're having any technical difficulties, if you want to know how to turn the live transcript on, or if you can't see the interpreter.
That's great. Thanks, Sharon. So, of course, we're able to do these free webinars thanks to our generous sponsor, who is LearnUpon. LearnUpon is one of my favorite learning management systems, and I do not say that lightly. Being in this space, and one of the main services we provide at Leah Chang Learning is working with organizations to pick the right learning management system vendor and to work with them to implement it successfully. You know, we've done this a lot with lots of different vendors, and LearnUpon is one of our favorite for a couple of reasons. One, for nonprofits, they're really great in terms of you can share your portals. So with LearnUpon, I have subportals, and I actually am able to host instances for other organizations, and we share the cost. So I really appreciate that. They're very user-friendly, and they make it user-friendly for both the learner as well as the administrator or the instructor. It's a very powerful and scalable platform. And mostly, I just really like the people at LearnUpon. They understand our use cases. They're willing to work with us. They're great at customer support. And I've been talking to them quite a lot recently about our accessibility journey and how we can optimize their platform. So that's going to be one of our tips today. Haha, foreshadowing. But I have a screenshot here of my LearnUpon dashboard. And so you can see that we are also learning how to leverage accessibility and work with the vendors that we use to distribute our learning. So anyway, enough of all of this intro. Let's get to the goods today. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually talk about what the heck is accessible online learning. It's really confusing, and we're not going to be able to get into everything. And we will speak specifically about some Canadian examples, but we recognize there are lots of Americans and some other international folks joining us today. We're going to give you 6 concrete takeaway tips and show you an example of each. And I hope we'll have time for Q&A, and if not, you can always send us questions by email. So that's really what we're aiming for today. And so let's get started with a brain prompt. I'm going to ask you to just think about this for a second, but how would you describe what accessible online learning is? Like, what is it? And if you had to describe it, let's say to somebody in an elevator or to your neighbor, how would you describe it in one sentence? It's kind of tough, right? So if you like, you're welcome to add something in the chat. We always like to see how you would interpret this. Here are some sentences I've encountered or that we've used before. In some ways, you could say that learning that is accessible, online learning that's accessible, is very similar to web accessibility. So can someone use your online platform system? Can they actually successfully complete the course? Right? So if someone is using assistive technology, such as a screen reader, and we're going to see that with Anu later today, you know, can they actually successfully navigate from beginning to end? And can they complete the course and access all the content? So that's an okay definition of learning accessibility, but it's not great. And so my team at Leah Chang Learning, we're really concerned with, like, can we design a great experience? What is the learning experience design that we want to adopt? And so you're going to hear us talk about LXD, or you might see that acronym. So that's learning experience design. And for us, designing the learning experience means optimizing it for all learners. So we don't want someone to just be able to get through the course. We want them to have a great experience and for it to be very impactful. And so that's you know, it's going to take some practice, right? And so we're going to talk about that today. So let's just do a quick poll and gauge. And I'm going to ask Lindsay to help me here too. So I'm just curious, how would you rate your organization's learning offerings at this point in time? So maybe you're working alone, maybe you're on a team, but either way, just rate, like, are you at a 0? You know, you have no learning offerings that are accessible. Or are you championing learning accessibility right now? Maybe you have ASL interpreters, maybe you have screen reader ability to complete your course. I don't know. So I'm just going to check in with Lindsay. Are we able to see the poll? I'm wondering if...
It just popped up, so I think
oh,
people
there
are
we
going to be able
go.
to see it right away.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Lindsay because, of course, you're the director of ATB, you know, and ATB has done quite a lot of work in that space as well. So just curious, like if you think that's typical, or, you know, where are most people in Canada at this point, you think?
If I had to take a guess, I'd say most organizations fall at about a 3. I think the low-hanging fruit they're shooting for, but I think having really great accessible learning experiences are probably where people are trying to get to and haven't quite gotten there yet. I live in Alberta. I'm based in Alberta, and we'll get into it later, but we don't have any accessibility legislation in this province. So I think we'll probably also see some varying degrees of excellence in this space, also based on where the organization is based and how much effort their provincial governments are asking them to put in as well.
Yeah, interesting. I think 3 is actually really good. Like in different provinces of Canada and across the states, I'd say that organizations are all over the map. So let's just see, Sharon, if you want to show us the poll results. So looks like 17% are not doing any at all, and that's okay. You know, you got to start somewhere. We have 33% at 2 out of 5. Okay, pretty good. We have 28% out of 3. So yeah, that seems to align with what you were saying, Lindsay. Oh, and we have 17% at 4 out of 5 and 6% at 5 out of 5. I'm excited to see this. This is great. So I have to be honest, and thank you, Sharon, for those poll results. We can move on. Wherever you're at, there's always more you can do, and that's fine. Don't feel overwhelmed. Let's start with something, right? And so that's the message of today is 2022 can be your time to embrace more accessibility, and we're going to give you some tips for that. So here's what I would suggest you don't do. If you're at a 1 or 2 out of 5, I would not recommend that you go to the World Wide Web Consortium accessibility sort of source, which is the w3.org website. It's pretty overwhelming, and sometimes even when I go there, I'm like, I don't know what to start with. So for those who can see the screen, you can see that it's a screenshot of the home page, but essentially it's a very overwhelming website. So the message here is it's normal to feel confused. Websites have been, you know, they're much more advanced in terms of understanding the specifics of what they need to do. There's a lot of checklists for web accessibility that don't really apply to learning. But some of this is, of course, useful for us. The question is, how do you wade through all that information? And so here are a couple of things you need to know. There are different standards or levels or iterations of what is called web accessibility. And our team calls it WCAG, but I've also heard it being referred to as WCAG. So we're going to use this acronym quite a bit. So our different provinces have different minimum standards of WCAG, and you may also hear the acronym A, AA, or AAA. And there's a ton of accessibility checklists, and I see some people in the chat are asking some great questions about like which ones are the best. If you are advanced in that journey and your organization has really embraced accessibility, you're ready for checklists. If you're not there yet, that's okay. Checklists can be very overwhelming and also not that helpful. So we're going to give you 6 tips to think about it differently. And at this point, before I pass it to Anu, I just want to give you a quick overview of what are the minimum levels of accessibility. And we're still trying to figure this out ourselves. So apologies if this table is not particularly pretty or filled in amply, but in BC, where we are, we just passed legislation this summer. And so it is now the law to embrace web accessibility level of 2.0. And in 2024, that will start to be enforced. So you can see now it's just getting started, but Ontario is way ahead of us. Their minimum level of accessibility is 2.1. And they've had the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, AODA, for a much longer time than the rest of the country. So I don't know, Lindsay, do you want to mention anything here? It's kind of confusing, right? And different provinces, different countries have different standards, but the idea here is we should all be doing something at this point, and it will become law very soon for all of us. And more importantly, it's just the right thing to do, right?
Yeah, I think one of the pieces that has been a learning journey for me is understanding the difference between legislation and standards. And so what we see on here is legislation. This is compulsory, and it tends to be really broad in how it's laid out. And part of that's because it takes a long time to get legislation passed. And so the broader it is, the easier that process is. Standards are sometimes industry driven, like the WCAG. Sometimes they are written by government. They tend to be a lot more specific, and they can be compulsory or voluntary. So that's been the big learning experience for me in recent years, is understanding how the two are different. And standards are often about bringing legislation to life. So that's how the two connect.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. I'm still very confused by all this, and this is the space we work in a lot. And I'm just going to do a shout out for our American clients and colleagues who are joining us today. But you know, in the States, your legislation has been quite different. In some ways, you're way ahead of us in Canada. You know, the Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act has really advanced the need and the desire, and also the enforcement of some of these levels. So all of this aside, the idea here is it's time. It's time to embrace this, and we're going to now share our tips for how to boost your learning accessibility, because whether it's the law or not, we should be doing this, right? We want to do the right thing. This is part of your diversity, equity, and inclusion mandates. It's part of being an ally and a partner with people with disabilities. And so on that note, I'd really like to start off with tip number 1. I'm going to pass it over to Anu, and I'm going to read the tip slide, which is tip number 1, include people with lived experience. And so Anu, can you tell us a bit more about this tip? What does this mean? What are the examples? And I'm going to start with the slide that says, nothing about me without me. So you take it away. You let me know when I should drive the slides forward.
Sure, definitely. So when we start any project related to accessibility, it's really, really important to get people involved with lived experiences. So for example, if you're wanting to improve your website, it's a really, really good idea to get people to test your website, for example, or evaluate your website to determine how accessible it is, so that people with lived experience who are using the technology and navigating these types of websites are able to give you honest feedback as to whether your website is actually accessible or not. And because we use the technology, more often than not, we would be able to provide those recommendations to you to help you improve your accessibility. So that's where that that point comes into place that Leah talked about. And so it's just a really, really good idea to get people involved with lived experience.
Yeah, and this relates a lot to the work we do. I say we, holistically. On our team, we work a lot with different communities, different people from different backgrounds. If that is our learner audience, we should never design without working with them at many points. So Anu, I'm going to go to the next slide. Tell us more about how we can do that and what that looks like. So your tips in terms of how to include people with lived experience.
Yeah, so there are various ways you can reach out to people with lived experience. So one way is through a consultant like myself, and there are many others out there in your local communities who work as a profession in this field. There are other kinds of community groups that you can reach out to do particular kinds of focus groups or other types of research to really get a sense of where you're at in your accessibility, and they can provide that, you know, feedback to you.
Yeah, thanks, Anu. And when we were preparing the slides, you and I were chatting quite a bit about, you know, it's important not to just use people with lived experience at the end of your project, right? Like, don't bring
Yes.
them in just to test and then find out everything is glitchy and doesn't work. So when do you think it's best in your project plan, or, you know, logistically when you're doing this kind of work, to include them?
Honestly, right from the get-go, if possible. It's really important to get people involved right from the beginning of your project, in the middle of your project, and at the end, so that the people with lived experience can be a part of that process and provide you with any feedback along the way. So if you kind of are, you know, doing your project, and then at the end, you bring us someone like a subject matter expert in, and you find out, oh, there's all these glitches and whatnot. It'll just save you so much time if you get people like myself involved from the get-go, so we can actually provide you with those necessary tips and feedback, so that it will be a much more smoother experience for you.
Awesome. Yeah, and we're learning that as well. So thanks, Anu, for going on that journey with us. I have to say it's been eye-opening, not just to work with people with lived experience on the content of a course or a learning experience, but also on the experience itself. So on both the content and the delivery. So let's have a look at what your experience is like. For example, in this very situation that we're in, this webinar, I'm gonna now ask Anu to demonstrate her screen reader experience, and I'm going to ask everyone to get involved. So what I'm going to start with is I will stop sharing. You're not going to see the slides for a second. And when Anu's ready, she's going to share her screen, and you're going to hear what she is hearing with her screen reader. And you use JAWS, right, Anu?
Yes, so I use a screen reader called JAWS. It's been around for a number of years, and it is one of the most popular screen reading softwares out there. With time, there are others that have come on the market as well, but this is the one that I learned how to use early on when I lost my vision, and it seems to be the one that I'm most comfortable with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and you're going to hear very, very fast speech in the beginning. And as I do this, I'll navigate through a website. And then what I'll do is, after that, I will actually slow the speech down so you can hear the difference in the speech rate. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
And as Anu's pulling that up, we also...
Sorry.
Ooh. No, go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
Oh, do you want to finish what you were saying?
Well, all I was going to say is she can also read out some of the chat messages that are coming in. So if you would like to hear what Anu is hearing when you chat to her, you can also use the chat function right now. But you let us know, Anu, when you're ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go for it.
All right. So conveniently,
holy
I have
smokes,
my
that's
own
fast.
website up. So JAWS works with keyboard and sound, and it enables a person with complete vision loss to navigate all kinds of documents and websites and all other kinds of platforms just through keyboard and sound. So there are various keyboard commands that one can use, but there are some basic navigational keys that are standard and really, really help to improve the efficiency for screen reader users. So I'm going to just go ahead and...
List of 6 items. Visit the current page, link home. Link about Anu. Link services. Link creative projects. Link articles. Link contact me. List end. Navigation region end article.
So let me just go back up to
Navigate,
maybe
list end, link
about
contact, link articles. Link creative projects. Link services. Link about Anu.
And I'll press enter here.
Enter. Anu vision and evoke your mind, empower yourself, impact your life. Google Chrome. About Anu Anu vision Google Chrome and link articles. Page has 5 regions, 2 headings and 12 links. Heading level 1 about Anu. Visit link home //.
So how many people understood what I just heard?
That's correct. That's so fast. That's like another language. Holy smokes.
Yes, it is.
Follow me heading level 2.
Whoops. No.
About Anu from visit unlabeled navigation region. List of 6 items. Visit link home. Visit the current page, link services. Link creative link articles. Link Link contact me. List end. Navigation region end. Heading level 1 about Anu. Visit link home. Slash about Anu.
Wow.
Main region. Main region. Article.
So
Communicator, educator, lifelong learner, change maker. Credentials.
yeah, and so I won't go through all of it, but what I'll do is I'll
From Aaron Noble to
now,
everyone. That's a bit overwhelming.
yes, it is overwhelming. It is for me as
From
well,
elementary to everyone.
trust
We're using
me.
trying to keep up.
Um, uh, what I do is when I'm hearing a lot of speech in my ear, I press the control key, which is like literally my best friend, because it can be very, very overwhelming to hear so much information. And when you're in a Zoom meeting or a
From Leah Chang,
webinar
everyone. Lisa's doing a great
like
job.
this, where there is a lot of feedback, whether it's from, if you have a lot of participants in your meeting and they're talking, and then you have
From 11:30 to
your
everyone. Whoa.
jaws going, and then you have chats going, it can get a bit overwhelming. But for experienced screen reader users like myself, I'm able to manage it. But yes, I agree, it can be overwhelming. So what I'm going to do now is slow my speech down
Task switching to move to the meeting controls. JAWS home use.
and give you another experience here.
Menu bar. Voice sub menu V. Enter. Voice adjustment V. Enter. Leaving menus. Voice adjustment dialog. Speak sample button to active. Voice adjust combo box. All PC cursor voice.
Oops,
Voice person combo box. Read 1 of 8. Voice adjust. All context.
what I do here.
Voice rate 106. Left right slider 60%. Increase 58%. 57%. 38%. 37%. 20%.
Oh, that sounds a little bit
Enter. JAWS
easier to understand
Well,
now.
yeah, so let's go back to the same page.
About Anu N-A New Vision Google Chrome. To move to an item, press the arrow keys. About Anu N-A New Vision Google Chrome Anu Olive. Credentials. Section BA Professional Communications, Royal Roads University. Section Diploma Rehabilitation and Disability Management.
So you can see, I'd like to hear in the chat what you think of this now. Are you able to understand it much better?
Section Professional Co-Active Coach Certification, the Coaches Training Institute. Section Certificate, Career Development Practitioner, Simon Fraser University. From Kirsten Brinkworth.
I didn't get what Kirsten said, sorry.
From Leah Chang /L to everyone. Interesting that bullets read a section. Section Certificate, Chronic Pain Management, University of Victoria.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it also depends on how the website has been developed from the back end. So these are definitely
From Ellen
things
Gregory
to look
to
at.
everyone. Still need to get used to hearing section and wondering what my design sounds like.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, there are certain websites when you go through something like a bulleted list, it does read out bullets, and that could be just something on the back end that can be changed.
From Star Peterson to
So,
everyone. I find it difficult to understand robotic voices.
Yeah, so that's the one thing
From
actually.
Mariano for them to everyone.
With,
Hi Anu, are you
with
able to
this
show us how you use the screen reader for closed caption videos?
Okay, I'll get to the closed caption video in a second. But with regards to the previous question, can you just repeat that one again? There was a question.
I can read it out for you, Anu.
thank
So
you.
Marianne is asking us, are you able to show us how you use the screen reader for closed caption videos? And we're actually going to talk about closed captions. If we have time, maybe we can have a quick look. We may have to pull something up, but I just want to summarize and also like acknowledge how wow this is. Everyone has really wide open eyes. The comments are coming in. Sometimes we just need to see or hear or live through how you navigate through content, and just that alone as a designer is really going to help us understand, oh yeah, the back end has to be optimized. Maybe we should limit the number of words, or how is this person navigating from beginning to end? We have to make it easy for them, right? So thank you for sharing that. It's pretty eye-opening and ear-opening for me too. I just want to also acknowledge Lisa's doing a great job of signing both our discussion and the robotic voice that's coming out. Bravo, everyone.
I just wanted to say one last thing before we move on, just with in relation to the robotic voices. Now there are actually much more human sounding voices, and I have tried some of those too, but there are different voices that one can download as well. I'm just so used to this voice that I haven't changed it, but yes, it can be, there are options out there for sure.
Great. Well, thank you, Anu. That was really exciting. I'm just going to go back to our slides now. And can everyone let me know if you can see the slides or not? Okay, great. So thanks for that example. And of course, that's just one small insight into what one accessibility user's journey is, and that's just in this webinar. So make sure you do that in your courses too. Okay, great. We're going to go to tip number 2 here, and I'm going to pass it over to Lindsay. And this is really key for us as a team, but also as professionals. Tip number 2 is start your design with the learner experience in mind. And it sounds sort of like, yeah, of course, but really, are you doing this? So go ahead, Lindsay, and really hold us accountable. Are we doing this? And let me know when to drive the slide forward.
Sure. Yeah, so when I built my first accessible course, I did what I think most people do. And the first thing I did was jump onto the WCAG website and try to navigate that information, and then figure out how I could take my course authoring software and comply with these checklists. And I would strongly advocate don't approach accessibility that way. So when we start first by thinking about the people that we're building for, rather than the tools and the limitations of the tools that we're using, you come up with something much, much better. So I would always recommend when you're trying to build something and you're trying to build it for everyone, really step back and think about who are the people that you're building it for and what is ultimately your goal. And I think our goal for almost everything is likely that you are trying to build an amazing learning experience that changes people. You want people to walk away and remember and take something from that experience. So focus on that goal first. And instead of trying to figure out, oh, how do I make my tools work and what interactions are accessible and which ones aren't, and getting kind of bogged down in that detail, think more about how do you want people to feel when they complete your course or your vlog or your video, whatever learning experience you're creating. How do you want them to describe that experience to others? What things would you want them to say that they'd be advocating for what you've created? So if you start with those first, your kind of intended outcomes, it's much easier to work back and think about how you're actually going to make those happen. So some key things I would recommend that should define learner experience. These are sort of your minimums you want to work towards. So first things first, think about what are the important visual and navigational and interactive elements that are going to bring your content to life. So I think about some of the pieces we've created at ATB, and there are some visual elements that are incredibly important in order to really have the ATB voice come alive. So we use images that are authentic and they represent the Albertans that we serve, and they should be candid in nature. And so we want to make sure that that element is preserved when we are creating for an audience of everybody. So we'll talk a little bit later about how we do that. One of those is through alternate text, but you want to have that alternate text, for example, really well describe your visual elements if those visual elements are table stakes. So really think about what are the visual elements that are table stakes and what are the stuff that's miscellaneous, and do I need to keep the miscellaneous or can I get rid of it? You really want to hone in on how you want people to navigate through your content. So do I want it to be linear? Do I want people to jump back and forth? Why do I want that? Do I want it to be unlocked? Do I want it to be locked down? Why do I want that? Really focus in on how you want people to navigate through what you're creating. Because when you step back to then look at how am I going to facilitate that with my technology, you have a better understanding of why you're doing it. And then the last little bit here is the interactive elements. When you've developed your learning objectives and you understand what you want people to take away and be able to do with what you create, the skills you want them to develop, then you have a better opportunity to think about what kinds of interactive elements help people practice and develop those skills. And then you're able to step back and say, okay, how do I make my technology do this in a way that everyone can access that? I think a lot of us are sometimes guilty for saying, oh, I'm going to do a drag and drop. And then how do I retrofit this drag and drop into something that is actually accessible? Don't start with the interaction, start with the skill that you're trying to build with the interaction, and you'll find a way to make it happen. So those are kind of the tech stuff. The second thing, which Anu has already spoken to quite eloquently, is you really need to gain insight on who your users are. You really need to understand what they value, what their abilities are, and what their limitations are, both personally, but also contextually. So one of the things I've taken away as I've been able to broaden my understanding of user experience is you are not your user. Say it again. You are not your user. This is really important. It's become a mantra for me. You might share characteristics with the people you are building things for, but never assume that your preferences, your capabilities, and what technology you have access to describes their context. And that is really important. So go out there and find out who your users are. Talk to them. Involve them in all elements of your process. Walk them through your design. Have them go through your initial build. Have them potentially be a part of your design and content gathering, but really get to know who you're building for and make sure that you understand these key elements: values, abilities, limitations. And I say personal and contextual because never underestimate what technology people actually do have access to. People in rural areas often do not have fantastic internet, and that might really change how you decide to build what you are building. And when you think about captioning and providing transcripts and some of the great accessibility features you can bring in, make sure those work on all bandwidth. You don't want to provide something that's not going to work well. So really focus in on both of those elements. And then the last thing I would offer is make sure you make your stuff easy to use. It's kind of a user experience 101 piece, but a lot of us forget about it. So really take a look at where are people having hiccups in their experience with the things you've built in the past. Talk to people who've used it. Don't take the feedback personally. Sometimes that can be hard. And take a look at how you can use that moving forward. So are you putting things in the same place on every slide, or does that next button navigate depending on where you have slide space? That might be a bit of a barrier. Do you have descriptions for buttons that make sense, or are they open to interpretation? Sometimes we have like fun, inventive ways that we want to have people move forward in courses, like I'm ready, let's go. That doesn't necessarily mean next to everybody. So finding out how you can make your things easier to navigate through and easy to use, that's going to really change up and actually create a really fantastic experience. So one of the examples, we can move on to the next slide, of this in action is some work we did with Inclusion Canada. So we created a course, the Inclusive Workplace. And the key audience for this particular course, our primary audience, were individuals who are on the autism spectrum. And the secondary audience were folks, potential employers, or even folks who worked with employment agencies to help connect employers and our primary audience together. So a couple of the learning experience pieces that we made sure that we created here. One, there was a visual brand created for this particular offering that was done in consultation with people with lived experience. So what you might notice by looking at the webpage that Leah has shown here is it's got a lot of great white space, and there's only one primary accent color of pink used. So we don't have a lot of color here. There is really simple font choices, and we also went for plain language. So a definition of plain language, which I have borrowed from the Plain Language Association International, is that any communication that is whose wording, structure, and design are so clear that the intended audience can easily find what they need, we consider that plain language. So for us, that meant writing content at a grade 4 level. And that meant that anyone that we were seeking to give this content to could understand it. So those were some of the key elements we incorporated here. We had really great clean visual branding that worked for the intended audience. They wanted their pages uncluttered. They wanted to have not a lot of color. They wanted lots of white space. We also made sure we used plain language so everyone could clearly understand it. And we did involve people with lived experience at all elements. So they were involved in the design and reviewing of the storyboards. They were part of the visual image selection process. They were part of the filmed scenarios they did. They were actors in those filmed scenarios. We also had a select group do some testing of our final build and provide feedback around it. And then they became advocates for the program as well. So there was a lot of elements of this experience that we really focused in on the people who were using it, and the technology was secondary.
Wow, so many gems in what you just shared, Lindsay. Thank you so much. I'm just going to go back to our slides here. So we'd love to talk about this even more. We have so much we can share, and lessons learned that we, and mistakes that we made too, that we've grown from along the way. So please reach out to us if you'd like to hear any more about the examples, some of the projects we've worked on. And I just want to mention this analogy or this icon I had on the slide, which is, don't try to force something square into a round hole or vice versa. It's really important to have user experience in mind from the very beginning. And I think one takeaway for people in our industry is I think learning professionals can really learn from user experience designers. Take some design courses, and that's really, a great industry to lean on. Thank you, Lindsay. We're going to move on to a couple other tips. Is there anything else you want to share before I zip through tips 3 to 6?
I think we're ready for tips 3 to 6. You're good to go.
Okay, thanks. And keep those chat questions coming. I did notice someone in the chat said, what's your favorite checklist? And so I think what we're saying here is checklists are great, but they're not the best way to keep the user experience in mind, right? So here are some other tips that are very tangible that you can embrace right away, even if your organization isn't fully prepared or isn't, you're just getting started. Tip number 3 is pretty simple. If you can commit to making all your media accessible, then you're well on your way to getting better at being accessible in general. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means for videos. So and on this slide, you have a video play icon. The idea here is that all videos could have closed captioning and transcripts. And that's not just for people who use screen readers. It's or for people who are deaf. It's helpful for me. I watch all my videos, even Netflix, with subtitles. Sometimes, and because I read really fast, and that's just something, that's how I like to consume content. Sometimes I find it easier and faster for me to read the transcript of a video than to watch the whole thing. And so that gives me as a user some choice. And so although I may not be the intended user of all that I'm designing, what I do want to do as a designer is add choice to my experience, right? So here's what that could look like. I'm going to go into the first example, which is alt text. And so Lindsay mentioned this earlier. Alt text is alternative text. It's really great for example, Anu can toggle through, and if she lands on an image, she can get a description of the image, so she's not missing out. It also provides some context. It's also great for SEO, search engine optimization. So marketers, digital marketing, they've been using alt text for ages in sort of, let's say, slightly surreptitious ways to get Google to crawl and pick up your site. And you know what? We've learned a lot from digital marketers in terms of how to optimize alt text. It does take practice. And as a learner, alt text can help you increase your understanding or distract you from the learning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what alt text means in the learning world. So here's a picture of a bear, okay? Here's a bad example of alt text. We're zoomed in on the face of a brown bear, sometimes known as a grizzly, gazing majestically into the middle distance. Perhaps she's hungry or spotted a threat. So that's bad because there's too much information. It's distracting us. It does describe sort of this mystical look on the bear's face, but really, is that important? I don't know. Also, Google and search engine optimization will not like that alt text description. Here's another bad example of alt text. Bear, brown bear, grizzly, grizzly bear, mama bear, carnivore. So again, or mammal or whatever, right? Again, Google will not like a long string of keywords, and it also isn't very descriptive for the learner, right? It's okay if you just say brown bear, right? I don't need to say image of brown bear because the person using a screen reader knows this is an image when they land on it, right? It's good to say close up of a bear's face. Okay, if this was like a picture, a decorative picture on a website, that would be fine. But if this is a course about bears and maybe how their nose or their facial expressions play a key role in how they navigate their environment, then we need to be way more descriptive than this. And so you need to describe the image in the context of your learning. If it is purely decorative, then just say so. If it is extremely important to what the learning content is, then go into that detail. So I'm going to ask Anu, because alt text is pretty subjective, right? What are your personal tips in terms of alt text? Like, what are your pet peeves, and what are some things that you can advise our audience to do in terms of good alt text?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Leah. I think it's really important to have alt text that is very clear, simple, and short. I think what ends up happening is when I think people have good intentions and wanting to provide lots of detail, but I think it's really important to take a step back and see, ask yourself, what is really, what are you trying to convey to the user, to the viewer? What is relevant and what can be left out? So that can be tricky sometimes because you're wanting to, the whole intention of alt text is to provide detail to that particular image or for that particular image, but really important to keep in mind to keep the content simple and short and clear.
Yeah, simple, short, and clear, especially if you're listening 2 times the speed, like
Yes.
Anu, right? Yeah, thanks. Those are great tips. And, I think it depends on every situation. So just check in with people who need the alt text or who can give you feedback on that. And we're learning so much about that too. So thanks, Anu. I'm going to just quickly talk about videos. We, as a team, have decided minimum standard for all our clients, all of our work, all our videos will have closed captions. However, we are thinking about Lindsay's tip, for learner experience. When are closed captions hard-coded, like they just appear, you don't have to click on anything, and when are they optional? So for example, someone could turn them on if they want to see them or not. And that depends on your audience. So we've worked a lot with the neurodiverse audience, people on the spectrum, people with intellectual disability, and sometimes that audience may find closed captions distracting. And so again, we include them, but we provide choice. We also include a transcript. And so I'm going to show you what that looks like. It's going beyond just the closed captions. So here's a screenshot of a course we're designing in Articulate Rise. It's got a placeholder video. The video is from YouTube. It has closed captions. We also include the video transcript, and we make that activity optional. But if people want to see or read or skim through or scan the video transcript, that's up to them. And I find that useful as a learner on my end as well, especially if you're going back to a course and reviewing something that you saw or heard in a course after the fact. So anyway, that's just a minimum that our team has embraced for everything. And so that is one way you can adopt more accessibility in your learning offerings or even in your web offerings. We don't have much more time. We have 2 more tips I want to talk about, actually 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So as you can see, we are modeling how to lean on accessibility vendors, and that's tip number 4. There's so many great companies out there, services, products that can help you do what you need to do. It's you're not the only ones out there. So for example, if you need to make all your PDFs accessible, so that would be PDF UA. If you need to have a website that's not quite accessible, and I'm going through that journey right now, my website is not accessible yet, but I'm working with some great vendors and designers to make it accessible. If you need help with videos, closed captioning, all that stuff, or if you need help making your e-learning accessible, or even the delivery systems, your learning management system, that houses your e-learning, reach out to professionals. Like, these people specialize in this stuff. So for example, our team is working lots in articulate storyline. We work with LMS vendors to optimize accessibility. We use these vendors ourselves. And so one of which that we're using today, and I'm going to the slide that has a Grackle Docs image. Grackle Docs, this logo here is, they're a Canadian company. What it is a Chrome extension that helps us make all of our slides and Google Sheets, Google Docs, which we use a lot. It helps us check for accessibility. Microsoft also does this. There's lots of vendors out there that provide these accessibility checkers, you know, like Adobe also has a great one. So reach out to your vendors, lean on them, and you're not doing this alone and you're not doing it from scratch. So if you want to check out Grackle Docs, just a shout out to them. We're having great success using them, and it's not that expensive either. Number 5, tip number 5, and I'm going to go a little quickly. Thank you to Shelby and Lisa for keeping up with us. Number 5 is optimize your learning technology. Most of us these days do have a learning management system. So you probably have a vendor, or maybe you have an open source, but you're working with somebody to, you know, maybe help you implement it or host it. Anyway, talk to your vendors. Hey, have we turned on all the accessible functions? Can you take me on a tour of maybe what your new releases are? Or hold them accountable and say, hey, are you WCAG 2.1? Because that's law. We need to make sure that our learning offerings and our delivery mechanisms are accessible. So sometimes they are, and you just haven't optimized them. So I have an icon here of a toggle button that you just have to switch to on. So make sure you have them turned on. Make sure you've used and populated it with your alt text. Make sure that you've tested it and that people can navigate through your systems and platforms. And of course, ask for help. Again, your vendors should be helping you with this. And here's an example of that. We've been using WebAIM. There's a free tool. It's a web accessibility evaluation tool. We use this on websites. We use this on our own platform. We are using Learnupon to share our courses. So it's a great tool to test, and it's a third-party neutral tool. So you can test that if your platforms and systems are accessible or not, and then walk through your findings with your vendor, get them to help you. Yeah, awesome. And the last tip today, and I think this is a great tip to leave off on, is get involved in your accessibility community. There are some amazing supports out there, and we are very lucky to work with some of them as clients, to have them as colleagues, but get more proficient at online accessibility in general. You know, get involved in the space, get to meet people who use this assistive technology. You know, I'm so grateful for colleagues like Anu. We've worked with some other colleagues too who have helped us test our courses. We're working with self-advocates to write our courses from the beginning. But this is a great opportunity to increase your network in terms of resources, sharing tips, lessons learned, learn from others, but there are so many other benefits to getting involved. For example, funding. If you're a nonprofit, or even if you are for-profit, there's a lot of funding out there for increased accessibility. So, you know, tap into that network, right? I'm just going to ask everyone, if you have another tip in terms of getting involved with your community, please share it in the chat. And I'm going to give you some examples of the organizations in our network that we really have learned a lot from. One of them is in BC. We have the President's Group, so the Accessible Employers of BC. We've been working with Inclusion Canada and CASDA, which is the Canadian Autism Spectrum Disorder Alliance. These are also bilingual associations. We also work with the Seneve Family Foundation in Alberta. We're working on another version of Employment Works. Anyway, we get to hang out with these amazing organizations and learn so much more. So if you have any key groups or key resources that you'd like to share in the chat, this is our opportunity to create this space of a community of practice. So that was a quick whirlwind of 6 tips. Again, we're just starting off with getting you to boost something in terms of learning accessibility for next year. And so just to summarize, we're going to repeat those 6 tips again for you right now. If you'd like, in the chat, maybe you can share what your biggest takeaway is today. So tip number 1 was collaborate with people with lived experience. Tip number 2, design with the learner experience in mind from the beginning. Tip number 3, increase your access to all media, alt text, videos, etc. Tip number 4, lean on accessibility vendors. Get them to help you with this. Tip number 5 is optimize your learning technology. Turn things on, chat with your vendor, take that journey together. And finally, tip number 6 is make sure you get involved. There's a lot of organizations out there that can support you with resources and get you tapped into the accessibility journey that we're all on. And so I just want to acknowledge that we're here at the end of the year. I'm wearing my ugly Christmas sweater. I'm wearing a Santa who's surfing, so I'm dressed accordingly. Thanks for taking the time and this busy time of year during the pre-holiday season. But let's take a quick second, and I'd like to give you a very clear call to action. Which of the 6 accessibility tips will you adopt? And are you pledging and committing to embracing fully in 2022? So go ahead and launch that poll, Sharon. Again, this is a great way for you to hold yourself accountable with this community. You're in a safe space. It's all about trying and starting off with something, right? So maybe you're doing some of these already, but there are some that you're not embracing fully. So go ahead and ask that question. I'm just going to pass it over to Lindsay or Anu. If you have any words of wisdom or inspiration or closing, this is a great time to share those. Lindsay, do you have anything you want to share?
I would just say, don't be scared to try, and don't be scared about being perfect your first run. I was not by any means. I don't think any of us were. So the point is to just get out there and start with one thing, and be okay with that. Getting to fully accessible learning products is a journey, and likely won't be a destination. It will evolve. So just start on the journey.
Thank you. That's really inspiring and also good for us to hear too. Anu, do you have any words of wisdom or tips to share?
I was going to say something very similar to Lindsay as well. Just be open-minded and be open to the journey. As Lindsay and Leah, we've all been talking about this, and it's just it's okay to stumble and make mistakes, and we're not perfect, but we're just here to learn. But the first step is just be open-minded to try.
Yeah, thank you. Just curious if everyone's had a chance to vote. Let's have a look at those results. Oh, thanks, Sharon. Oh, great. Calls to action that people are committing to. Number 1, 19%, including people with lived experience. Yeah, that's so important. 44% are starting design with learner experience in mind. Great. 13% making all media accessible. Yeah, that's pretty low hanging fruit you can adopt, right? Number 6, 6%. Lean on accessibility vendors. Great. And if you want to know or have some referrals, you can always reach out to us. We've met some great people along the way. 6% also said optimizing their learning technology. Awesome. If you need help with that, don't hesitate to reach out. Sometimes it's a bit of a head scratcher, and we're learning a lot as we go too. And 13% get involved with your accessibility community. So please feel free to reach out to each other. If you want to share your email or your organization in the chat, feel free to do so. And also connect with us on LinkedIn. In essence, accessibility consultants can do so much, and I sincerely apologize, I did not have time to update this slide. I think I forgot. But Anu, what are some of the services you provide as an accessibility consultant that organizations can reach out to you for?
Yeah, there's I think some of the key ones are testing, so web accessibility testing. So whether it's your platforms or your website, that's something I can support with. I can support with content writing. I'm also a podcaster. So if you're looking at creating other kinds of content through media, that's another area I can support with as well. Those are just a few.
Yeah, thank you so much. And
training.
Together I have here that we together can provide training. We've worked on testing or, providing expertise as a group. And Anu works sometimes with us being learning consultants. And on that end of the scale or the Venn diagram of things, people like Lindsay and I can support with not just your learning tools and products themselves. Like, yes, all of your courses need to be optimized for accessibility, but just general digital competency and skills of your organization, doing needs assessment of learning, helping you with your strategy in terms of how you use learning technology, and overall assessment and measurement of all of those learning things. So yeah, we've gone through a lot today, but I think a couple words that I'd like to leave with you. Our organization provides some really great on-demand nonprofit learning. So please check out our learning management system, and which is hosted by LearnUpon. And we're actually turning all of these into accessible courses, and that's been really fun for us to try and practice. So we'd love some feedback. So reach out to us. You can see these on our website. We do offer lots of courses for nonprofits. And I just want to share some ways to stay in touch with our wonderful speakers today. So from the Leah Chang Learning Team, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. The website is leahchanglearning.com. I love emails. We also have Sharon here joining us. Sharon does a lot of moderation in terms of like increasing accessibility in these virtual sessions. Anu, you can reach her at info@a-newvision.ca. She also has a fantastic podcast. I recommend you subscribe. And Lindsay, letclark.learning@gmail.com. Lindsay is also really active on LinkedIn. Is there any other ways you'd appreciate people to reach out to you? What's the best way to stay in touch?
Yeah,
I think I knew you're on Facebook too. Yeah.
Yeah, Facebook, LinkedIn is good too.
Great. And I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone for joining us. This has been one of our most well-attended and most in-demand topics and webinars, and like that is so exciting. So thanks again for making some time on this pre-holiday December day. And we will be putting up the recording on YouTube, sharing it on our blog, and would be happy to share the slides as an accessible version PDF if you would like. So thank you to our interpreters, Shelby and Lisa. We also had Devin Curry, who's the founder of Maple Communications. Thanks for your comments, everybody. And thanks to our speakers and our moderator today. Have a wonderful day.